Thanks, everybody. Good morning. Congrats to those of you who found a seat today. And I think there's some people who are still stuck in the hall. If you can move their way forward, make some room for those people. But congrats, seriously, thanks for coming out. I know it's super early. Nice to have everybody here. Thanks to the panelists as well. Brian's put together an esteemed group here. The topic that we're talking about is titled Connectivity Strategies that Keep Landlords Ahead of the Technology Curve While Boosting Tenant Happiness, Accelerating University Productivity, and Enhancing Net Income. So we couldn't find a better group of people to talk about this. We've got from sort of my left to right, Hannah, Zeeshan, and Shaun. Maybe take 30 seconds just to tell everybody a bit about yourself.
Hi, so yeah, I'm Hannah. I am the Manager of Business Development at Snail. So we're Canada's largest parcel locker company. We do automated parcel management systems in multi-residential. It's the biggest market. Student housing is a really nice portion of that. And of course, we've got commercial and everything else in the range there. But yeah, this is a great opportunity to discuss what kind of benefits this kind of tech adds to the type of housing, but student housing especially.
Guys, my name is Zeeshan. I'm the co-founder, president of Mosino One. We mostly focus on multifamily, student housing, commercial, industrial spaces. We provide property management tools, digital concierge, access control, and different. So it's a platform that brings a lot of those services together. And I'm excited to learn more about the industry and what are the challenges that we're really facing and what we can do as technology providers and hopefully help them out.
My name is Shaun McCracken. I'm the Regional Director for Student Operations for Centurion Property Associates under the Mark brand as our student brand. And I'm here today to give a little bit of the property manager perspective when it comes to the infrastructure that's being put in place nowadays by many of these companies to my left.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. And as Brian said, I'm Gary Kenning, co-founder at Cloudwifi. We're Canada's largest managed Wi-Fi provider for the student residences. So we manage over 100 student properties across the country. And while we started out as sort of internet and Wi-Fi only, we've sort of seen the evolution to more of that connectivity partner, just helping customers who are trying to get on board, Internet of Things, smart buildings, that sort of thing. So that's kind of what ties it all back today. To get started, let's talk about sort of, I think what a lot of people understand or hear the word smart buildings. What does that mean in the context of student residence? What technologies are being integrated into these types of buildings to make them smart? Might be a good one for Zeeshan to start out with.
So when it comes to smart building, it generally changes the definition as time goes on because technology keeps on changing. So whatever we call smart buildings today, it may change 6 months down the line, a year down the line. What we see smart building as of right now is the ability for systems to be interconnected and provide a more of a seamless experience. That could be improving communication, such as communication between two people, communication between a system and a person, communication between systems and systems. So smart building is the ability for us to build that layer of technology that acts as your eyes and ears in the building itself, whether it's a campus, whether it's a multifamily building. So that technology layer acts as your eyes and ears that you can use to make more smarter decisions as going forward and provide a better or seamless experience.
Anyone else want to add on smart buildings?
Well, I think to your point, I mean, it's two sort of looks at it. You can look at it from the resident perspective of service and what they're getting in terms of your leasability of the building and how it's advertised and what they sort of see as value add. Or your value propositions, what you're being able to provide. But I also see smart buildings on the second side, which is the way we look at almost our smart houses nowadays, in that it also gives you immense opportunity when it comes to building operation, building automation. So it then takes a point of, you don't have to have potentially maintenance tech every single day checking your boilers, checking your HVAC system. Somebody from your head office could have access to all 150 properties across the country. You get a BAS system that's automated to be able to let you know what's going on, tell your hallway temperatures, be able to take those automations to a step further. So it's beneficial from both sides. And then again, in Hannah's situation, her world with parcel lockers, I think it just adds a level in which that as a property manager, you can do more things remotely. And so you can spread out potentially your staffing to be able to support different buildings when you have those buildings turned into smart buildings.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also agree, you know, the technology and smart buildings, they are ever evolving. Like we're seeing new tech every day. You know, something that was super high tech yesterday, it's changing today. So I'm sure all of our software teams are going crazy on a weekly basis trying to keep up with the trends and what's needed. But yeah, exactly. Like when you're looking at any type of smart tech for buildings, it's not only benefiting the residents, which obviously adds a level of convenience to their day-to-day life and, you know, makes them want to go, oh, I can let something in from my cell phone. I don't need to go to the buzzer in my unit anymore. So it's good for them on those sort of fronts, but also on the property management side of things. Like we see, I mean, in our market, we see a lot of property managers or securities or concierge, especially over COVID, having to do things like manage packages. And that's not what they were hired to do. That's not what they agreed to do. And it just takes up such a large amount of time. So putting any type of like technological system in that can take away that additional time spent and assign them to, you know, actual roles that they're supposed to be doing on a day-to-day basis, you know, it's beneficial on both of the ends there. I don't think that's typically noticed right offhand is how much it can also help internally as opposed to just a return for your residents.
Now, Hannah, you mentioned COVID, and that's kind of an interesting. I'm curious to see as we've sort of spent a few years in a different world and coming through COVID. How have you guys seen things, you know, what's changed from a student's perspective, a resident's perspective? Have their expectations changed of technology and what a building should look like? The way that you're going to manage these buildings, is there certain things that you're having to do differently now than you might have done in 2019?
I think a big thing, obviously, especially in, you know, personal management for us, is everybody changed the way they operate on a day-to-day basis. So nobody go to stores, grocery stores, but if you needed anything else, you know, you had to order online. So a big thing that we saw change was obviously you went from maybe 10 parcels a day to like hundreds. So, you know, everybody's ordering everything and made a massive change during COVID. So we did a survey just at the very tail end of that. And we actually saw that whether it was security or concierge or managers, whoever was in charge of the front end of that building, on a daily basis, they were spending like 10 minutes per package to actually accept these and log them and put them somewhere in the building. So like I said, that obviously takes up a large amount of time when you start adding that up. But that was a big change there. But also since COVID, you get so used to the convenience of doing that, right? Like, why would I go to the mall? It's a 15-minute drive to walk through hundreds of people to go get something when I can order something on Amazon. It's going to be at my door tomorrow. So that has certainly stuck with the trends as well. And, you know, I think everybody expected COVID to skyrocket with these sorts of things and probably drop very shortly after. I'm sure, I mean, I can obviously speak for ourselves. I'm sure everybody else here can as well. That really didn't happen. People are continuing. We've even seen like the older demographic adopted as well. And I think those are the people that we really didn't expect to be jumping online and buying stuff. And actually, from what I have noticed, is they're the ones that are the most excited to do it. Like they get into it, you know, grandkids come in and show them how to do it, and they're super psyched now. And they're the ones that are buying things every single day just to experience how it works. So it's a very interesting change for sure.
I think some of it comes down to the expediency of service that they expect now. So pre-COVID, you were used to going to a desk or having to go to a central hub or somewhere. Even when you look at on-campus life now, you know, there's institutions that used to have, you know, a service desk that you go to for the registrar's office or for one card service. And now you're seeing it move towards more of an expediency of online service. So I think that, you know, there's a movement towards that you'll still always have desks, but I think it goes into obviously Zeeshan's portfolio in that residents are now expecting to be able to walk into a building and have that building be full service, whether there's a desk there or not, or be able to connect with your staff in a moment's notice. And so you see people utilizing Teams during COVID. People were using Teams in a way where the desk agent was just sitting on a Teams call that all the residents had access to that link. And so they're just sitting with a headset on, and residents can pop in and ask questions as they want, and they no longer have to come to the desk for service. And then you're utilizing, again, parcel lockers to say, I'll get you your key, I'm going to drop it into a parcel locker, and you can come down later and have that non-contact to it. But I think, you know, as we move more and more out of COVID, there's great things that we're holding on to, great products coming out, but I think that the level of service is not increasing. It's the time in which it takes to get that service is increasing.
I think one thing I would add here is that, and what Hannah said and Shaun said was very true. People expect a certain level of services as soon as they enter the building, and even I would say before so large student housing, we have international students coming in and they set themselves up a week before they arrive. So they preset when they arrive at the building. But one thing we saw from a software point of view is that we were given more room to experiment. So during COVID, we got the chance to build functionalities, features that a few years before that would not have been something that people would have asked for, because there was a lot of person-to-person contact where people would reach out to you and they'd get a key fob or they would set up a parcel system. But during the COVID time, because there was a lot of unknowns, we were able to build functionality, and not everything like that. We built temperature controls functionality with we could detect if somebody's actually hot or not. That did not work out for obvious reasons, but there were other features that we had built, real-time communication, two-way communication, the ability for people to be able to reach out to a property manager through an application of sorts, or get notification of a new parcel that comes in right away for you and use it for different purposes. So that 3 years, or let's say 4 years, with many companies like us were able to experiment with new functionality and features, and they were adopted by the property managers because everybody was looking for a newer ways to communicate. And we saw during the COVID time, the 55 and above communities we work in, we saw higher usage of the system. So there was more interaction. A few years before that, many would have dismissed it by saying, no, certain age group may not use those technology, but we saw that COVID got into use those technology, and if it works properly, you have a higher user engagement.
Very interesting. And Hannah, you said something that resonated in my world too. You said, people thought that the packages would, ramp way up, of course, during COVID and then sort of fall off a cliff, but people just learned a different way of living and doing things. And we saw that on the internet too, right? If you think about what was important during COVID, everybody needed to be online for working, for schooling, what have you. And so it was like, you'd hear from people, oh, what a good thing you have an internet company. Beats having a restaurant for sure, and it was critical. But I think the same expectation was, thought that now people are going back to the real world. They don't need to be online all the time, but we're sort of seeing, outside of some strange blips during COVID with, vacant buildings or partially vacant buildings, and it's sort of got a shift to daytime traffic more, but you really see that long-term graph. We're still seeing sort of mid 30% year over year bandwidth increases in the same building, and that really hasn't changed. You haven't seen any drop off since COVID.
I think a really big thing as well, especially in student housing, is a lot of, if you want to like at least half of the kids that are in school now, they were in high school. So that's, such a important time development wise. And they started maybe grade 10 or grade 11 all online. They weren't going to class. They weren't interacting with people on a daily basis. So, I mean, I'm sure everybody can agree, when you isolate yourself for a while, you kind of get used to being alone, and you don't really want to go interact with people and go out for dinner and do all this fun stuff until you really force yourself to do it. So at that young of an age, adapting to that lifestyle, and now they're, living on their own in student housing, what makes them want to go to the mall? Like, what makes them want to do all the extra stuff when they've literally adapted to such a convenient lifestyle of not having to interact with people and being able to do all these extra things that we all can do? So, I mean, I use it more than anybody else does, but I'm sure, especially in the student world, they're going to be the ones that you're seeing a lot more frequently using anything internet-wise, or anything that's going to add means that they don't need to go talk to somebody, essentially.
Shaun, you mentioned earlier some of the things around, alerts in your building, the HVAC monitoring and stuff. I'm curious on the tenant side of things. Are you seeing any technologies where you're seeing they're aiding in tenant retention, maybe aiding in property value improvements, things like that? Are there certain technologies that are having kind of that better return from a tenant perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I think obviously I'm wondering, that's a plug. Obviously, we're fortunate we do have Cloudwifi in our student properties, which is it's benefited us very well. And I think that, you know, we talk about what residents are looking for in terms of amenities, and a lot of the time when we use the term amenity, we think of brick and mortar spaces, and we think of, you know, a study room, we think of a lounge, we think of those types of things. But, you know, are we thinking nowadays, you know, yes, your property has to have Wi-Fi. I know I'm probably answering questions coming up, but it needs to be included. If you don't include Wi-Fi in a student property nowadays, you are behind the times. Because it is, when you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's below even the like providing a place to live. They could be outside on a bench, but as long as they can connect to your Wi-Fi, they'd be absolutely, you know, peachy, because they still connect to everybody. So I think that when we talk Wi-Fi, that is now a basic need. I often refer to the car industry. If you get a car and it doesn't have heated seats or doesn't have Bluetooth connectivity now, you're going, that's standard. And that's what our residents are now coming in and saying, Wi-Fi is standard and good quality Wi-Fi. So I know that there's some that say, you know, we're going to provide this type of bandwidth or this type of service, and you can go to a company or you can ask to upgrade your unit if you're somebody who's a gamer. But I think we need to be providing the type of Wi-Fi that people can be gaming and streaming all day long, no matter who they are, and have 5 devices or 6 devices connected to that access point as well. So it's really interesting, and those are the types of things to see. But I think when we talk amenities now, we need to start talking about, you know, almost like a smart classroom. We need to have study rooms that, instead of having study rooms that are a massive space where 20 people can go, having 4 or 5 pods that have a smart TV that you can connect and practice presentations, that you can do streaming with the professor, look at, you know, even including a camera on the wall that you provide as the property manager for them to be able to stream into a class, because those are the types of things, as we see students still are coming out of COVID, but not every class is returning to in the classroom. They may have 5 classes, but 4 of them are in person, 1 of them is still online. They may have a couple of people within the property that are also in the same class, and if you provide them an opportunity to go to a space where they can have that class together, it's great. But I think that when we talk about what tools, obviously Zeeshan's products, being able to provide these intercoms that are smart technology. I'm still blown away by, you know, people being able to walk into a building and have facial recognition that then unlocks the door, and they can program for kids or friends that like they want to be able to come in, and they just walk right in. I do think, you know, again, getting down to the point where somebody can go up to a screen or recognize their face and say, what's my current tenant ledger at? And having them spit up, your current ledger is at $650 outstanding. I think those are the types of things that we're going to start seeing that tenants will expect. I think that in many cases, somebody in the industry is going to start setting the bar on certain technologies that will become standard. So to Hannah's point, there's things that we're doing today that we think is hip, cool, and, you know, really innovative. But to a, you know, 18, 19-year-old coming in to stay at your building, it's like, wow, this building's old. And it's like, we built it 10 years ago. Like this is not like 1960s brick and mortar. Like, we built it yesterday, and you think it's old. So those are the types of things that the moment you put something in place, you have to have a plan of expiry on it, because we're used to putting technology in place that is going to last 20 years. And now we're putting technology in place that we realistically have to be having those conversations with our technical services team or CapEx teams about, yes, you have to scale back the expectations. That technology is going to be replaced in 5 years. It's not going to go 20 or 10 years.
I have a good thought process when it comes to the tech industry, especially in buildings, and it's, if you're not ahead, you're behind. So if you're not looking into the future of, you know, what can we get our teams to start working on to offer, and, you know, obviously it's not going to be on the market today, but we can offer it quicker than somebody who thinks about it later, right? So if you're not thinking ahead and you're not working on developing something that's going to be a big change to what's currently in the market being offered, you're way behind, because anybody who works in software, we all know it does not happen overnight. When I first started in this industry, I definitely thought, like, I was asking, like, hey, can we get this done? How long is that going to be? Oh, it's going to be 3 months. I'm saying, I'm like, what do you mean 3 months? Like, it's not just like you click a button and it's done. And you learn very quickly that's absolutely not what it is. And I'm sure all of our software teams actually hate us because of it. So it's a long road. It takes a lot of trial and error. And you want to make sure that you're ahead of that curve so that when, we see something small come out, or maybe you want to be the first, it's going to make a big difference in the market. And, you've got the, like, after offering extra convenience, and from the property management side of things, you're absolutely going to have like in the market of, does somebody want to live in your building? Because I want to live in the building that's most convenient for me and has the coolest technology on the market, as opposed to the building when I need to do the extra work, I can't check my temperature, like just all that sort of thing. So yes, certainly if you are not ahead right now, you are definitely behind, for sure.
And Zeeshan, you may be able to speak to like one of the things I'm always curious about, and I'm fortunate to be able to chat with Brandy and Conestoga over here, and that, I think one of the things that I'm always curious from the property management standard, looking at companies that are providing these technologies, is how are you deciding where you're spending your time to invest in what technologies? Because, I think a lot of the time what we as an industry, and even at the time with working in post-secondary, that we sometimes maybe have a shortfall on, is we don't talk to the actual people that are going to be the end users. And so, if you work or have properties within a town that has a large institution, we have properties in KW, we've got Conestoga, Laurier, and UW right there. And if you don't take time to approach the institution even and say, is there a possibility of me doing a little market survey, or focus group, or can I connect with you on what you're hearing from the students of today? Because they're going to have people moving into their buildings, first year residents on campus, and they have a captive audience right there of what your future market is. And so it's trying to understand what they need. And so when you're looking at new technology, those things, how are you identifying that that's actually what an 18 to 24-year-old needs, when we're definitely not at that age?
So I'll give you a quick background. I've been writing software for almost 24 years now, and I'm still an engineer. When I started off early on, one of the biggest challenges I had was it was a closed mindset, sitting in the lab building something and pretending that's going to work in the market. So for example, if I had built something with 22 years ago, I would have built something that would not have worked in the building, because no feedback would have come back to us telling us, even though it looks nice on the paper, it won't work. So throughout the years building the software for companies, one thing myself and my team and everybody has realized is that every time you approach any technology, you have to first say, what is it solving? It has to solve an actual problem, whether it's a big problem or small problem, it has to solve a problem. Once you solve a problem, you can then say, can you have a measurable way of checking the value? Because if I give you something that's really great, it may not work for your environment. So we have to be able to show you, here's a technology, this is the problem it solves, and this is how you're going to be able to measure it 3 months down the line, does it even work for you? Example of parcels, right? You can know how many calls are being made to people, or parcels being missed or lost, and then when you have a parcel locker in your building, you know exactly what it solves. So there's a real value that comes to it. So for companies like us and yourself and Cloudwifi and others in the market, the constant question we all have to ask is that whatever we're trying to solve, does it solve an actual problem? Because if you identify a problem and then you find a technology the best suited for that, it works much better than finding a technology and then trying to apply it to a problem. You mentioned about the Wi-Fi before. We've been talking for years now, and Cloudwifi is here, and we've spoken to Gary many times about this too. And we tell every builder, apart from giving Wi-Fi to your customer, you also have to make sure the Wi-Fi is in your building for the infrastructure. To get to the smart building, you have to have the standardized, stable network in your building. Because even if you're not using 100% of it, you're going to use it eventually, but at least you will have the foundation.
Piggybacking on that, just as you said, like solving the problem portion, and I guess kind of piggybacking on my head, you're certainly behind thing, is also being innovative and thinking of problems that people don't even realize are problems. Because that was a huge thing in the parcel market, is nobody realized it was a problem until somebody was coming and saying, hey, this is a problem. I don't think you guys noticed. Like, your concierge is spending 5 hours a day doing this. Here's your solution. And then that's, when everybody starts to sit down and think, you know what, they're right. This is a problem. This is something we see, and they start paying attention. So that's where we start to see, such an increase in demand, is when you make people aware of that problem. And that's definitely what keeps you innovative and ahead. And again, same thing in property management. If you come out with something you're the first building in the city that offers something that you don't even realize. Like I saw a development recently that in all the units, they have the Lululemon smart mirror, whatever they call it. I don't know what to call it, but it's this mirror that does all like activities, like it's all workouts for you, and you stand in your unit now, and it's offering that to the residents. So they use this mirror and they work out in it. And again, I never thought I want a $500 mirror in my unit so that I can do exercises instead of needing to pay for a gym membership. And obviously it's a luxury amenity, but they're offering it. And now people are going, wow, that's really cool. Like that's something I don't want to move out of this building. So where am I going to get from anywhere else? Nobody. So it gives you a selling point for sure.
Amazing. There's several references with all of you around, it's easier, of course, to build a new building today and sort of factoring technology. Shaun, you made a comment around the feedback of a 10-year-old building, while still very new in our world, is kind of a fossil right into some people's perceptions. So what do you do on the retrofit side? How do you make that older building, whether it's truly old or not, but how do you make it look like the brand new shiny object, the new building that comes out? What are some strategies that have worked in retrofitting? What are some of the challenges? This might be a good one for you, Zeeshan, because I know a lot of what you do is focusing on sort of that integration side where you can say, hey, we'll work with any hardware. I think it allows some of those older buildings to kind of bring up to current, but I'm curious to see what thoughts you have on the retrofit versus the new build side.
So for retrofit, even from a business point of view, you can imagine 95% of the buildings are already built. So there's the old market out there where every company like us and others are trying to solve a problem where they want to get to that 95% of the market that has already been built, and they need technology because you can't just rip it apart the entire building and try to make it new. So one of the challenges that we face and that we work on quite often is how do you get the technology that requires a decent amount of infrastructure changes? So whether it's existing access control system, whether it's actually working on getting the basic Wi-Fi in the building itself, so you can get hardware that's solely dependent on Wi-Fi as opposed to Zigbee or Z-Wave or Matter for that purpose. The idea would be to figure out what tech is required and how do you implement it. And that constant question is something that we ask ourselves and try to build around it. Because for us to go out to Shaun and say, Shaun, we'd like to upgrade your building, the first question you would ask is, well, how do I do my existing building? You also don't want to have a newer building have much better technology stack, and then the older ones have no options. So you want to get some of the solution that works across the board, so he doesn't have to have multiple people learning different technology and then realize this only works in this building, that works in the other building. So apart from the industry as a whole, going into that sector itself where they're building better technology, easier to implement, least amount of infrastructure requirements, we have to, as software companies, we have to constantly work on top of it to make sure how do we leverage that technology now and make it easy for Shaun to implement this across his existing properties.
For sure. And like you said, when you're looking at large portfolio companies like Shaun, I'm sure has seen this a lot, and they have the existing and they have a lot of new developments coming down the road. Most companies like the cohesiveness, like they want to bring in one company, one provider, and put it in all their buildings. So Zeeshan, I know I've spoken with you guys quite a bit about retrofit specifically and how that is such a big market, and you guys have such a leg up in it, because when you're looking at any type of big building automation system, if there's an existing building and they want to go from brick and mortar, we've got a buzzer at the front door sort of thing, that everybody hates that sound, and they want to start implementing some sort of automated building system, the first thing that's going to happen when they go to another company is going to be, okay, well, we need to rip everything up and put all new stuff in. Okay, what's that cost? A lot. So knowing that there is some form of system that can be integrated with existing material, that's obviously going to save them money and it's going to save them time, is really important and very, very helpful. And again, your old buildings, are never going to be as up to date and as swanky as your new ones. I mean, even just how things look. We all know the modern buildings have all the nice, sleek textiles and such. So they're never going to be the same. They're never going to be, I don't say as good, but as good. But it's better to offer something that's going to help in some way as opposed to nothing at all.
Yeah, obviously, retrofit is much more expensive than if you're just building it in the first place. I think that, it depends on, again, the technology is really what it depends on is that we see what we used to see in sort of size of computers, and now we see what size is now. And so, there's some situations where, yeah, you're looking at an intercom and you're like, wow, if I can replace that, it's going to be a huge cost, but you're actually going to get something that's like a third of the size of the wall. It's just now a smart technology intercom. But obviously, when you're looking at things like parcel lockers, those types of things, that's physical square footage that you have to now redesign that becomes sometimes challenging. So I think, from the new development side, all of those things, as Zeeshan said, like things need to just be built with all the capabilities into it. And I know that, for the developers in the room and also for anybody who's involved in CapEx infrastructure, like it will make them cringe because us, operations guys, we always ask for like the moon and the stars. And so, but it's real because, the right hand has to talk to the left. And so I think that's where, I feel, with Centurion, one of the things that we do really well is, our capital and investment team really do listen to the operations team and really do seek to understand how that's going to work. So as Zeeshan's issue that, if they build something that we can't operate, well, like that's going to affect NOI, it's going to affect reviews, it's going to affect tenant retention, relations, lease upability, all those types of things. And so I think it's important that when you're talking about retrofits and we're talking about redevelopment, is that you have to have all your key stakeholders at the table. Some of it may involve residents, if you want to go as far as that, resident at the table when you're trying to talk about some of the custom refits or technology that you want into the property. But I think that, yes, Hannah said it correct as well, that you don't want to have a disproportional point of buildings that are seen as old and don't have the technology, buildings that do have the technology. So I think it's important that if you're going to invest in certain technology, you also need to show your residents and tenants a rollout plan across your properties. So it may not be in your building today, but 2 years it may be. And when we work in student housing, we're going to have it usually for 2-3 years. And so they can see the long term coming. But I think that's where like the retrofit, from my point of view, is usually, if you're doing it now in one, you have to be able to describe how you're doing it all and allocate it from a budget perspective. We do the same thing with renovation plans. We'll say, this is how we're working throughout the building. So it's not done this year, but it's planned for, and things can happen. Budgets can all of a sudden need to be moved. Things are pushed, but as long as you're communicating. But I really do feel that, we're doing a new fob system in one of our properties, and it's meant to be a cloud-based fob system for the future. That, right now we have the old, I would say, brick and mortar fob system, which is you go down to the desk and you take a programmer up and you plug it into the door and those types of things. And now we're, in one of our properties, we're installing obviously the radio antennas, those types of things to be able to communicate from the desk to the door, live update, all those types of programming. But there was an additional cost that we felt was warranted, and that was to put the cloud-based infrastructure in place for the future properties that are coming down the line. So we're not using that for the current property because we can still manage it within the network of the building. But we put the infrastructure in place to then pull it and make it work throughout the other properties. So in the future years, the costs actually lower because we're not putting that infrastructure in place that's already there. So I think that's the piece that when you're thinking of retrofit as well, is you don't have to think about just doing one building at a time. It's also, you need to think about the network and the infrastructure you have to put in place to then do it across the hall.
I think another big thing, sorry, Greg, you mentioned the stakeholders portion, and you guys are a lot more flexible. You have stakeholders and teams that actually listen to what you guys recommend. And I think that is a really important thing, is listening to obviously residents, operations teams that actually see this, on the ground and what we're hearing, and taking that into consideration. So I think a lot of stakeholders and investors, they see the dollar signs. I know they see the dollar signs and they go, ooh, That's, a lot. We don't really want to do that. But you need to keep in mind, we're getting feedback. The residents are providing it. What is the best way? What's actually going to make you the most money in the long term by implementing this stuff? And Gary, you and I were actually having an interesting conversation yesterday about condo boards and how, your residents had come up and said, like, we want to do this. This is the solution. Basically mapped it all out. And the investors, nah. So, those are small things, but they're things that add to the building that right now, yeah, it costs money. A couple years down the road, it's making you more money. It's going to give you a leg up to, increase that rent, give a reason to, we offer this now. It's not just, a plain old building. We have these extra things, and this is, people want to pay more for that. So.
Some great points. I like how, obviously, considering the cost, not a very exciting topic to talk about. How do you pay for these things? But, you both mentioned it, so let me ask you a bit of a follow-up question. Are there any successful strategies that you've seen to sort of help pay for these things, to balance out, maybe the initial CapEx versus some OpEx savings, and then even additional OpEx that some of these solutions will incur? Just looking to see if there's any creative financing strategies for making your building.
Yeah, I think the thing that we can fall into is that we often think about money in terms of the time now, but we don't think about the money in terms of long term. Many of our companies, and when we're looking at it, is there's a clear divide between what's CapEx dollars and what's operating dollars. And I think sometimes the ones that are going to be successful and nimble in the future are the ones that see it as what it is, one pot of money. It's not two silos. And so, yes, there may be a CapEx infrastructure cost to certain things that in the long term operating budget will actually be the one that sees the savings. And so we have to be okay with that our technical services team can't take it on the chin in terms of wow, we're spending all this money on this thing. We as an operations group also need to be able to sometimes come to the rescue of, yes, that's expensive and they're going to incur that cost. But look at what we're doing down the line. So Zeeshan's product, I know it's something that can be very nerve-wracking to be able to talk about, and some people don't want to talk about it. But a lot of the products, when we talk about AI generation and services, it's going to impact how many desks we potentially need to have, how many front-facing staff we need to be able to do, and so there's savings to that. And I'm not saying we're not saying that you're looking to reduce staff. It's that as we see technology come up, you're going to have to retrain staff to be able to manage these things. And so you may have, let's say, 2 front desk agents now, but in the future, you're going to have one at an actual desk, and you're going to have a staff member that's actually, looking after the infrastructure that's in place across all your properties. So, as I said earlier, tenants are looking for an ability to arrive at a property and have that property be full service without having to walk 5 or 10 minutes to your main hub building that has a service desk. And so I think those are the things that you need to be able to look at long term of, this is the CapEx costs. These are the savings, and so over the course of the 5 to 10 years of lifespan of the product, is that what's going to make you money? We saw it happen 5, 10 years ago. Many people probably went through the same thing. We saw it with the energy audit that happened, where people were spending huge dollars on switching to LED and new smart technology around, HVAC management, and there was huge cost those things. Some, universities, you saw they were spending $15 to $25 million to redo all their lighting systems throughout the entire institution. But over the next 30 years, we'll save $40 million. And so, those are the types of things that we need to start, looking at, is that it's very easy for us to get caught in the dollars of the now, when we need to be looking at the savings of the future and how long-term it both serves tenant retention, because there will be some things that we will absolutely spend money on with no plan to get an exact return on investment other than the ability for the building to be leased and the ability for tenants to see us and prospects to see us as leaders in the industry and the services that they look for. So, it's really interesting, the conversations that are happening now, because I think that's talking more and more that we're starting to look at long term that we've never done in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that I see a lot, like you just mentioned, the capital gives the sticker shock. So whoever's paying for it, they're looking at it going, wow, this is $30,000 up front, $40,000 up front, whatever. And that's where a lot of it ends. They go, that's high. I don't want to do that. And exactly, they're not looking down the road. They're not looking at, right now it's this much, but from there forward, our monthly bill is nominal. It's nothing. We can increase our rent. We can increase condo fees, like that sort of thing. But also not only that, implementing smart technology like AI or really anything that's gonna, I hate saying replace a person, but replace a person, you're also replacing a salary. So some of us hate hearing that, but a lot of people love it. So, you've got that 30,000 you're spending up front, you're getting more return on those monthlies in rent, et cetera. But you also don't need that third concierge. You don't need the extra security. So what's that saving you? 50,000 a year, 45,000 a year? They got whatever, right? So that's a massive one long term. You're saving 50 grand a year now off that one employee, on top of the increases that you're able to get from it. So that's, definitely not something that a lot of people are considering. And the ones that are, like yourselves, you're noticing it and you're able, to get in at the ground there and not be afraid of that initial sticker shock of it.
Hannah, you mentioned AI. AI is hot right now. Lots of buzz, and the evolution and progress of AI in the last 12 months is like nothing I've ever seen before, to be totally honest. I'd be curious to see where do you see AI taking a role in student housing? I know one of the sessions yesterday, the security section we were talking about, fascinating. They have 16, I think, maybe butchering the numbers, but 16 security guards working, and then they had deployed 800 cameras, each of them that had AI built into the camera. So it's kind of, call it like having 816 people watching, but not just the watching. Watching's been around a long time, but it's not just the eyes, it's the brain too. Where do you see, so security is kind of an obvious one, but are there other things in the student world that AI might assist with?
I think for me personally, I don't keep up with it a lot. It kind of makes me nervous in some ways, but Shaun had mentioned like there's technology out there now, like you can gain access to your building through your face. I trialed that at a demo and thought that was like the coolest thing ever. So, I think that's a big place. That's only going to expand. Like, what else are we going to be able to do with that kind of information? Like you said, walk up and see, oh, what's my outstanding balance in my account. So, I mean, it can only add more convenience, but like I said, I don't know specifics. I don't follow it as much, but I think it can only get even better from here, especially for the younger demographic that is super into it. So.
I think when it comes to AI, this is something we're very passionate about ourselves too, because it's a new paradigm shift now in this market now. You're going to see changes happening at a fast pace. The only challenge with AI would be where we see, so we already seen ChatGPT showcase how good a natural, AI could be. The problem with this is that you want to make it as personal as possible before you can implement it into your buildings. Because if the AI isn't personal enough, it would seem like one of those technology where we grew up seeing when you used to call Bell or Rogers or any other companies, and they would have this technology where you would say what you want to, what you help with. The problem with that is you would have to repeat yourself multiple times, and you would feel that it's not very personal. You would hang up and try to talk to the person. So even if AI today is very capable of processing natural language and providing you information, if it's not done in a personal way, then you're going to have challenges. And the other challenge with this also is the bias that comes along with this, with the AI. So one of the system we're implementing for AI in our platform, and many other companies are doing that in the market too, is lease application. So how do you simplify lease application using AI technology? How do you allow a property manager to vet through 150 applications and look at the top ones and then go through them? So if you could put some of the application and make it easier for the renewal process or even newer applications, AI would actually have a real value for you. But the problem with AI at that point would be, well, what kind of data does it use to make those decisions? Is the data biased? Is the data not enough for it to make more informed decisions? So even though I'm talking about the challenges right now, AI itself is going to have a huge impact on the whole concept of visual concierge. The ability for whatever person used to do at one point, an application can do it, but an application not only can provide you certain feedback, but also have a conversation in a more of a proper context where you're able to say, what's my balance? And it would say, here's your balance. But you could say, can I pay with 2 cards? And it would answer back, yes, you can pay with 2 cards, but it's got to be this or that. So that constant communication that, Shaun's team takes care of, if you can assist them with the AI technology, then AI would have a real value for folks like Shaun.
I think the other thing too is I see AI in terms of the service piece is it opens up potential doors for being able to ensure that you're communicating exactly what you're looking to be able to kind of have come across. As we see a shift in Canada, post-secondary, when we see a greater amount of international students coming in, a greater sort of change in the demographics, I think we also need to acknowledge that as much as somebody who's coming to Canada is looking to get a Canadian education, there's certain things in life that they need to be communicated in their own language so they can truly understand what is happening. I think that's what AI is going to be able to explode for us, is that if you have a concierge, screen you can walk up to, speak your own language and ask your own question and get a response back in the very same language so it's clear and understandable, because there's conversations now that, even just where you have, a conversation, whether it be French, Mandarin, Cantonese, anything like that, there are just little intricacies that if you use this word to somebody in English, they may be interpreting in a different way, and all of a sudden they've signed a lease, a contract, agreement with a completely different set of expectations than what you've provided them. And it's no one's fault in that situation. So I think AI will allow a greater amount. We see with the new Meta glasses that are coming out. Being able to say, what am I looking at? But I also think that fast forward 10 years from now, I think we'll all have earpieces on that, like, somebody can speak to us in a language, we'll translate it, put it into our ear. You'll speak to them, we'll translate it, put it into their ear. All those types of things that I think will come in the future, and it will just better enhance the resident experience, because as I used with the Maslow hierarchy of needs piece, is there are some times where I can appreciate if I went to, a different country across the ocean, there are times where I would just be so mad that I just can't get the response in English because I just want to understand. And it's got to be so frustrating and so challenging. And I empathize with anybody because it is so brave to, at 18 to 25 years old, cross an ocean or move somewhere and try to learn not only a very demanding post-secondary education, but also in a language that you haven't been using for a long time. And so I think that's where AI and smart technology, when it comes to property management, will really enhance. And the people that are able to do that will be far beyond being able to capitalize both on just basic the market of having the international influx come into your property, because you will be seen as an international friendly property manager.
And also with that, circling back kind of the COVID thing and people not really liking to socialize anymore, giving that personal connection where it feels like you're speaking to a human and we're not doing that, please explain your problem, and then they have something completely wrong and you call Bell or whoever. It's giving you the personal connection without having to actually interact with a person. So, like I said, the younger generation is very socially isolated, so they like avoiding that. So I think that's definitely a benefit they'll see for sure.
I think one more point I would bring up with AI, based on everything we talked about right now, is that AI would be, apart from solving language problems, it would also be great working behind the scenes. So a lot of times AI would be able to figure out issues before they happen and then address them. An example, if you're late on payments, the AI could actually reach out to you through a message and say, by the way, your payment is late. If you want to avoid late charges, you should at least send a message back. Instead of sending a message back, you could just say, yes, I'll be paying tomorrow. And then he would take that message, send it back to the property manager so they're alert about what's going to happen tomorrow for your payment. So there's going to be a lot of, apart from a lot of the problems they're going to solve, AI would also solve issues behind the scene. And that's where we would have to work, every software company in this panel and in the market has to work hard to make sure AI is implemented in a way that it actually solves a real problem for it. Because with AI, you lose track sometimes of what is it doing, how is it doing it. So unless there's a measurable way of seeing the impact of AI, it's going to be hard to implement it and then even justify its usage going forward.
Some awesome ideas there. The language thing is kind of resonated with me, Shaun. It's not something I put a whole bunch of thought into, but for all the international students, how important that is to this audience. You can see the impact of being able to talk in so many different languages and service your tenants and residents. I know we're short on time here coming up. Let's talk about the future. You guys kind of mentioned that a bit. Obviously, we've seen how far fast things have come in the last 5 to 10 years. What if we look forward to 5 to 10 years from now? Maybe more of a Zeeshan question because you're living in this, but whether you're an institution-owned building or for the privately owned buildings, what should they be thinking about or at least aware of in terms of what technology in these buildings might look like 5, 10 years down the road?
So apart from the IoT, hardware, sensors, noise sensors, occupancy sensor, knowing how many people are in a certain place, how there's a correlation between the number of people and the noise. Maybe there's something going on in one part of the campus itself. Whether it's using AI and a camera system to be able to detect patterns and seeing, okay, are we seeing something strange happening and can we take an action based on that? One of the biggest challenge that I see our industry facing as we go along is going to be privacy. So right now, Mosino comes from healthcare sector, so we have to comply with rules and regulation and privacy laws. There's none of that exists in the multifamily market yet. We gather the data, whether it's IoT, whether it's AI, we're going to gather a lot of data. There's got to be some sort of regulatory bodies that look at that kind of data that's been gathered and how is that data being processed. Because that data is going to be very critical on understanding what a person does or how do they live in your buildings. But how do you process the data? What you do with it is going to be a challenge going forward too. So apart from technology that needs to be looked into, whether it's IoT sensors, whether it's AI and using vision aspect, it's got to be also, we have to focus on the privacy aspect and the data protection, because that's going to become a challenge. The multifamily market doesn't have anything in place right now, similar to how California does. Quebec is coming out with a law similar to that, but there's got to be something more built similar to how it is in the healthcare sector, more for multifamily.
I think another big thing is we call it future proofing. I'm sure a lot of people do. When we're looking at, especially new builds, and exactly like Shaun has said a few times, what's built right now in 10 years is ancient. So a big thing is making sure that you're able to accommodate making changes in the future. So whether that's a hardware product like our lockers that obviously take up square footage, or a software system, you want to make sure that it's modular, right? Like you don't want to be stuck with what you're buying and installing and implementing today, and 10 years down the road, that's the fossil, and now you're paying to retrofit again. It's that whole nightmare. So seeing software, whether it's a SaaS or hardware or just a full software ran automation system, seeing that it's modular and you can make those changes as new things come out, as the demand increases, is also really important in looking as a property manager down the road of saying, what's going to change and what kind of flexibility do we have to do it.
I like that future proofing, and it was mentioned in the session yesterday as it relates to kind of my world, that internet and connectivity world. They were talking about the most difficult thing is like running the cable, right? We have customers that are building buildings today, developers. It's funny as you think about how the world has evolved. It's like, oh, wireless, everything. We don't need wires anymore. It's almost the opposite. You actually need more wires because everything sort of requires a cable. It's easier to do, when you have the chance rather than trying to retrofit cabling. And you get to the point where, Ethernet cabling, for example, can power lights. You mentioned LED lights. You don't need to have an electrician, wire in traditional lights anymore. You can use Ethernet network cabling to do lights. Same with all these sensors and stuff. So the idea is, hey, put more cabling in. At future-proofs the building, now you can do sort of more things. You can add all these different modules like you're mentioning, Hannah. In the last minute, I just wanted to see if anything from the audience, open up the floor, any quick questions out there that you'd like to ask the panel? No? Well, thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening and thanks for participating. Hopefully that helped give everybody a better idea on how sort of the intersection of technology and student housing are coming together, how they have been coming together and what's going to continue to change going forward. Thanks, guys.